Hello everyone, this theoretical lesson will be about verbal predicates, specifically intransitive verbs, their syntactic and semantic characterization. In this presentation, we will explore intransitive verbs and their semantic and syntactic differences and analyze the different theta roles associated to the different types of intransitive verbs. As we have seen before, intransitive verbs are one-place predicates. There are two types of intransitive verbs and they differ in the type of argument they select. While anergative verbs select an external argument, and accusative verbs select an internal argument. So, for instance, in these examples, the verb laugh in the sentence "she's laughing" is an anergative verb and selects an external argument that in this case receives the theta role of experiencer. On the contrary, the verb arrive is an accusative verb that selects an internal argument, and this argument receives the theta role of theme. As we can see, even though the arguments of both verb types occupy the subject position, they are syntactically and semantically different.
So let's start describing anergative verbs. These verbs, as we have already seen in the previous slide, select one external argument. This argument occupies the subject position. That is, its syntactic function is that of subject. Let's see a couple of examples. Harry slept under the stairs. They are laughing. In sentence 1, the verb sleep selects one external argument, the DP Harry, which receives the theta role of experiencer because it is the entity that perceives or experiences the event of sleeping. Much in the same way, in sentence 2, the verb laugh selects one external argument, the DP they, which also receives the theta role of experiencer. In both cases, as we have anticipated, the DPs selected by each verb function as the subject of each sentence. Next, we will present the theta roles that anergative verbs can assign to their sole argument. As we have discussed, anergative verbs select an external argument. We have seen in the examples in the previous slide that this argument can receive the theta role of experiencer. However, this is not the only possibility. Anergative verbs can assign the theta role of agent or experiencer to their sole argument. As you might remember, an agent is the entity that performs the action or the event, and it has the features plus animate plus volition. For example, Ron fought very bravely. In this example, the DP Ron receives the theta role of agent, as it is an animate and volitional entity that performs the event of fighting. An experiencer, on the other hand, is the entity that perceives or experiences the event, and it has the feature plus animate. For example, Ron is crying. In this case, the DP Ron is the animate entity that perceives the event of crying. Bear in mind that experiencers are minus volition, that is, they are not willing to perform the event, they just experience it. In the next slide, we will discuss intransitive and accusative verbs and their subclassification.
As stated, accusative verbs are the subclass of intransitive verbs that selects an internal argument. In here, we will analyze the subclasses of accusative verbs that we can have. Firstly, accusative verbs can belong to the subclass of verbs of movement or inherently directed motion. For example, in the bricks behind the leaky cauldron moved aside, where the verb move is an accusative verb of motion. The second subclass is that of verbs of appearance and existence. For instance, nearly headless Nick appeared during dinner. The third subclass is that of ergative verbs, where the verb denotes a change of state or a change of location. In this case, the feather is assigned the theta role of patient by the ergative verb levitate. In the case of move, the DP, the bricks behind the leaky cauldron, is an internal argument and receives the theta role of theme. In the case of appear, the DP nearly headless Nick in subject position originates as an internal argument and receives the theta role of theme as well. The same holds for the verb levitated when used as an ergative verb in the sentence in 1. The feather levitated. In here, the focus is on the change of location and the element that changes places. That is, the DP, the feather, is an internal argument as well, and it receives the theta role of patient in this particular case. Observe that even though the verb can be used as a transitive verb, as shown in 2, Hermione levitated the feather, when the focus is on the change of state or position, the verb becomes an accusative one, and its sole argument is an internal one. So in all cases, they select one internal argument, and this internal argument occupies the subject position. In relation to unaccusative verbs, we will see that each of these different subclasses that we have dealt with can be associated to different theta roles. In the case of unaccusative verbs of motion, all theta roles associated to the inherent movement of an entity from a place to another can be present in the sentence. As we already know, the entity that receives the action or moves is the theme. For example, in the sentence, the Hogwarts Express goes from King Cross Station to Hogwarts. In here, the DP, the Hogwarts Express, does not suffer a change of state as a result of the action, but it is the entity that moves, in this case, from King Cross Station to Hogwarts. Another theta role associated to verbs of movement is that of locative, and it specifies the place where the action or event denoted by the predicate is situated, as in centaurs live in the forbidden forest. In there, the PP in the forbidden forest receives the theta role of locative.
Apart from theme and locative, intransitive and accusative verbs of motion can also assign the theta role of source. An internal argument that receives this theta role refers to the location or entity from which something moves. For example, the Hogwarts Express goes from King Cross Station to Hogwarts. In this sentence, the PP from King Cross Station receives the theta role of source, because it is the location from which the Hogwarts Express moves. Also, unaccusative verbs of motion can assign the theta role of goal. This is the entity in the direction towards which something moves. For example, in the same sentence above, the PP to Hogwarts is a goal, because it is the direction towards which the Hogwarts Express moves. In the next slide, we will see the theta role and accusative ergative verbs assigned to their internal argument. Finally, unaccusative ergative verbs can assign the theta role of patient. This is the entity that undergoes actions or suffers a change of state or location. For example, Aragog died. Here, the DP Aragog receives the theta role of patient because it undergoes the action of dying, and as a consequence suffers a change of state. The spider is dead. In the following slides, we will see how to describe all these verbs taking into account their syntactic and semantic characteristics.